Welcome to Stuff They Didn't Teach Me in Sunday School. We're in Mark's Gospel looking at this time of clarification, prediction, confusion, as Jesus talks about his upcoming crucifixion, death, and resurrection. In the midst of this comes an event that would mark these guys for the rest of their lives. In Mark chapter 9, beginning of verse 2, after 6 days Jesus took with him Peter, James, and John. These are the inner three. One's missing, and I don't know why Andrew doesn't make the inner three, but whenever he takes three aside, it's always Peter, James, and John. James and John are brothers. Peter and Andrew are brothers. Peter, James, and John make the inner three. Andrew doesn't. You'll have to ask Andrew when you get to heaven if that bothered him. Peter, James, and John led them up to a high mountain apart by themselves and was transfigured before them. I don't know exactly what that means. He was changed. I assume he was glorified. It was the Jesus of heaven, not the Jesus of earth. His garments became glistening, intensely white, as no fuller on earth could bleach them. And there appeared to him Elijah, who had been bodily taken up to heaven, by the way, with Moses, whose grave nobody knew where it was because God took him. Two people that had no human grave on earth. Not only that, but two people that probably represent what the Jews saw as the law and the prophets. Moses representing the law, Elijah representing the prophets. And they were talking to Jesus. I would love to know what that conversation was about. I would love to be able to check out that video when I get to heaven and find out what the words they were saying to each other were. Peter said to Jesus, and here again, Peter has his mouth in gear before his brain's engaged. Peter says to Jesus, it's good to be here. Let's make 3 tents. One for you, one for Elijah, one for Moses. Let's just stay here. Folks, there are 6 people on that mountain. Peter isn't making tents for James and John and himself. He's making tents for Elijah and Moses and Jesus. We're told by Mark, for he did not know what to say. They were exceedingly afraid. And a cloud overshadowed them, and a voice came out of the cloud. This is my beloved Son. That's from Psalm 2, verse 7, which we generally consider as messianic and also as a royal psalm, a kingly psalm. And then the word, listen to him, from Deuteronomy. Listen to what he has to say. And suddenly, looking around, they no longer saw anyone with them, but Jesus only. And the answer to Peter's suggestion about building 3 tents is really a hike back down the mountain. Jesus' work was not up there on that mountain. It was going to be on another mountain, one strewn with skulls, one filled with blood, and one that would drip with his blood one day. It wasn't on this mountain. As they're coming down the mountain, he charged them to tell no one what they'd seen until the Son of Man should have risen from the dead. So they kept the matter to themselves, questioning what the rising from the dead meant. Now, why would they question what the rising from the dead meant? Because they don't get that he's going to die. They haven't figured that out. The second passion prediction, if you skip over a little bit, comes in verse 30 of Mark chapter 9. They went on from there and passed through Galilee, and he would not have anyone know it, for he was teaching his disciples, saying to them, the Son of Man will be delivered into the hands of men. They will kill him, and when he is killed, after 3 days he will rise. That's pretty plain, isn't it? But they did not understand the saying. Because, see, this isn't their idea of what Messiah is going to do. Messiah is going to get a white charger. Messiah is going to get an army. Messiah is going to lop off some Roman heads and get those stinking Romans out of there so that the Jews can once again be the ruling force in that nation, and that rule will be established and headed up by Messiah in their minds. Doesn't involve dying and rising. They came to Capernaum. When he was in the house, he asked them, what were you discussing on the way? But they were silent, for on the way they discussed with one another who was the greatest. So when Messiah comes into his kingdom, who's going to be vice Messiah? Who's going to be Secretary of State? Who's going to be, Secretary of the Interior? Who's going to have all these roles? That's what they're arguing about. Who's the greatest among these disciples? He sat down and called the 12, said to them, "If anyone would be first, he must be last of all and servant of all." So once again, he points them back to a servant role. If you want to be the greatest in the kingdom, you've got to be ready to be the least in the kingdom. You've got to be ready to be the servant. And he would show them the way to do that when he himself went willingly to the cross.